What's up, Internet? You're tuning in to episode 52 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello.
Hello, Steve. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm in vacation mode. As you're listening to this, I am in hopefully sunny Shropshire in England. Just chilling out, relaxing, probably playing some video games, which I'm looking forward to. It's been way too long since I've had a decent chunk of time to play some video games.
Yeah. I'm glad you're gonna be getting some time away. Well deserved. You've been working hard this year, so hopefully.
We both have. It's been a whole year, Pete. Next week's the 1 year special.
Yeah.
So make sure you get questions in.
Yeah. Everybody, we'll say that now. Make sure you write in because we have our 1 year anniversary coming up. We are going to be doing a very special episode where we'll kind of be looking back on some of our favorite moments from the show, hopefully reading some mail from you guys and your favorite moments from the first year of FlipScreen Games, all that good stuff. It'll be a fun little celebration episode, and I'll tease this now. We may have some announcements coming alongside that episode on the 1 year anniversary. Maybe some changes, some new stuff, some stuff happening here over at FlipScreen Games. So I can't really say anything more than that, but it's going to be one you're going to want to tune in for. I'll tell you that.
I could say more than that, but I just don't want to.
Well, no, you can't because I'll edit it out.
Yeah, but I do the audio, so it would be.
Damn, you're right.
Encourage people to subscribe to the audio version. There you go.
You're making a strong case. You could, so don't spoil it, okay? Everybody likes hype. Nobody likes spoilers, right?
Yeah.
So, we've got a good episode for you this week, too, though. So as much as I'm looking forward to that episode, we've got a good one here. We've got a fun start screen. We're going to be talking a little bit about the news around GTA 6 and Rockstar's quote-unquote reinvention coming hot off of the Bloomberg article talking all about the shakeup at Rockstar, as well as a certain company that everyone loves to hate stepping on a rake. So it's going to be a fun one. But before we jump into all that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of July. They are, of course, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valens, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Mary Berry, Smokey Shake, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all are the realest of the real, and we truly appreciate your support of this fine program. If you want to go and become a Patreon producer just like those fine folks and get your name read on the air, head over to patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. But you can also get a bunch of other perks and goodies, including early access to this and our sister show Nintendo Noise, our Patreon exclusive show One More Thing, and a bunch of other cool stuff. We've got an exclusive Discord channel. Lots of good stuff that's well worth your dollar over there if you'd like to go above and beyond to show your support. But if you don't, and you don't have any money to toss our way, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can get links to our Discord. You can find our social media. You can write into the show, questions at flipscreen.games, just like one Zaid Ida did for our start screen this week. So let's jump into it. He wrote in and said, "So, I've been curious, what's your favorite video game experience? What I mean by that is not just what your favorite game is, but more so the experience you had your first time playing through. My example of this is easy. Playing Persona 5 Royal with Pete is definitely my number one. Having someone share that experience just makes me look back fondly on what was a really scary time in the world. I also made an awesome friend during that time, although I'm sure we were friends before Persona 5 Royal. Love you guys and keep up the awesome work." Well, thank you.
Well, first of all, I gotta say, Zaid, I can't believe your favorite experience has not been playing Judgment with me over on twitch.tv/FlipScreenGames. But I won't take too much offense to that.
I think you should. I think you should take offense actually, because you didn't finish that game, and I finished Persona, so we got to have.
I haven't finished it because scheduling issues. Zaid's shifted things around, but we've been in talks. They're coming back soon.
Excuses. That's what I'm hearing. I wanted to say thank you, Zaid. I'm glad that I was a part of your favorite gaming memory. That's awesome.
Oh, that's nice.
I look back on that time very fondly as well. I think I have a couple answers. And some of them are
Me
like
too.
fairly well worn stories, so I won't belabor them. But one of them is definitely the experience of playing Dragon Age Origins for the first time, which I talked about fairly recently. Just like I had never played a game that had that level of depth of interaction with the story before, and it was like exactly what I wanted. And it's obviously a game that's a high I'm still chasing over a decade later, right? Replaying it and really enjoying myself. But yeah, playing that for the first time was such a moment for me, and I remember like skipping school and staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning playing it, and then falling asleep and waking up 4 hours later and playing more, and just really being so invested in that experience, and then wanting to replay it again and again and get different results and try different backstories and have relationships with different characters and things like that. So that's definitely one that I hold really, really close to my heart. But I think the penultimate answer for this has got to be, for me, Pokemon Blue. That's the most formative video game experience I've ever had, right? Like that was the first time that I ever deeply engaged with a game that like I owned by myself, right? And like nobody was there. Hey, this is a video game. Nobody was like helping me. No, like I had nothing but my own kind of like wits and a strategy guide that
Not even a I was gonna say not even a strategy guide. I bet you did have a strategy guide.
But here's the kicker, Steve. I had a strategy guide, but I could not read it. I was too young. My reading
should
level
have called up the Nintendo line, because you wouldn't have known that it cost $1.50 a minute, and you could have played ignorance.
I think I did call it one time, and then was like, "Hey, don't do that again." that cost money. But yeah, I had a strategy guide, and I remember I was like learning to read as I played Pokemon Blue the first time. So like I could read somewhat, but like there were lots of parts of it where it was like, oh, like this is a little too advanced for me. So like I remember I would like go anytime there was a word that came up in Pokemon that I didn't know, I would go to my dad and be like, "What's this word?" And he would be like, "Oh, like let's get the dictionary out and like learn it," and like I learned a lot of words because I was like, I want to get better and further in this game, and I'm having, I'm running into friction.
Think people get dictionaries out anymore? I bet they go to Google.
No, yeah, they go to Google. This was pre-Google. I was a little boy, and that was something that my dad would do. Or like if it was like a Pokemon name, like I remember being like, what's a like I was like what's a like I was trying to say what's a Magikarp, but I couldn't even like I was like
I was gonna say, did you get some wrong? Like, can you remember getting any Pokemon wrong and then hearing them on the TV show?
Oh
and
yeah,
you're like, oh, that's how you say it.
Yeah, not a lot for Gen 1 that I can think of, but for Gen 2 I definitely did. Like we were talking about it on Nintendo Noise this week, like I say Arceus, not Arceus, and like I'm not going to change on that.
Everyone said Arceus until like the last game. I had no idea what an Arceus was, and it's an Arc phone, so I presumed it was pronounced Arceus.
Yeah, no, it's too late. That ship has sailed. But like I did that with it's one of the 3 legendary dogs from Gen 2. It's Suicune. And when I was a kid, I used to say it was Suicune or Suicune and all these other things.
Oh, like Suikoden. That game always like caught me up. I was like, what? How do you say
that? Yeah, so like there's definitely examples like that, but not a ton of them, But like Magikarp was one where I was like, what is this? And my dad's like, well, that's not a word, so it must be a Pokemon. And I was like, and he was like, well, like based on the wordplay here, it's probably a magic fish. And I was like, oh, like, so like I was like learning about like entomology of words and stuff and like how puns worked and stuff because I was like trying to understand the game better. But yeah, like that was such a formative experience for me, right? Like I had my Game Boy with me everywhere I went. I was always playing the game and trying to unlock its secrets and complete the Pokedex and all that shit, like that was, and like I eventually discovered like the whole missing no thing and like being able to like take advantage of that and like find this totally new way to interact with the world and the game. And like there's so much about the reasons that I like video games come from that experience and being like rewarded for exploring, right? And like for testing the boundaries of the game and things like that. So yeah, that's like I think if I had to pick one, like that's the whole reason I play video games, right? Is like that.
Mhm.
And when I had the period where I was the most out of video games, it was the 1-2 punch of Arkham Asylum, which is another story I've told, and Dragon Age Origins that got me back into video games, and I was like, oh, like there's more for me here than than maybe I was giving credit or whatever. So like those are such, there's a lot of other games I could rattle off that, were really meaningful experiences for me, but those are ones that like the context of them is so ingrained in my like identity as a gamer that I feel like those have to be the short list.
Interesting.
How
And
about
yet,
you?
no,
Oh, no,
you've
go
got
ahead.
no like Pokemon or Dragon Age tattoos.
Not yet.
I'd have thought they'd have been right on there. I
Yeah,
thought Life is Strange would have been one that came up as an experience that meant a lot to you.
yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like the question is very like not
It's
your
not about the game.
right.
Yeah.
It's about the experience of the game. And like I remember the time and place of like playing Life is Strange for the first time and like why it meant something to me and everything, but like a lot of like the two game tattoos I have on this arm that aren't the PlayStation one are less about the game themselves and more about like what they meant in the context of me playing them,
Hmm.
you know? Like this
And
like
the fact that you just became a member of the Illuminati, right?
right, yes, that's
that what it
yeah,
is,
yeah. As a Marvel fan, you know that I'm a member of the Illuminati. But yeah, like the Majora's Mask tattoo is like more about like me graduating college than it is about Majora's Mask, right? And like the Life is Strange tattoo is more about like me like moving to like a new phase in my life, and like kind of like ending a chapter of like my early 20s and stuff. They are about those games, but it's also like I'm connecting emotions to the context of when I was playing them more so than like the experience of playing them, if that makes sense. Whereas like the core like memory of like playing Dragon Age like at 5 a.m. and like being like, oh, I want to get a little further. I want to get like that's something that I think of the moment of doing it as much as the game itself. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that might be a
No,
weird
totally.
distinction, but
No, I think Zaid's question was pretty clear. It's not about the game, right? Even if it wasn't Persona 5 playing that game with a friend or someone that they were creating content with is an enjoyable experience. I've got a lot on my list. It's really difficult for me to pin it down to one. There's recent memory things that we've spoken about, like Animal Crossing New Horizons, for example. It came at such a good time.
yeah,
It
that's
was
a
it
great
was
one.
there when everyone needed it. It was like a shining beacon of light in a really dark time. Stardew Valley was another one. I just remember downloading that game and just playing it with my ex until all hours, and we were just like playing it on two different computers, two different farms. We were like finding new things and like, oh, have you seen this yet? Experiencing it together, and it was a really nice experience. I had such a good time with that. Then there's stuff like playing Dream Daddy with my sister, going through that experience with her, and like playing that for the first time was really fun. But I think it's probably stuff when I was a kid. Like if like The Last of Us, for example, was a really formative thing for me. Like when I came back into video games, but it wasn't as much like a formative thing for me as like when I was playing games on PC or watching my dad play games when I was a kid. Like that was such a big thing for us. Like dad would play Resident Evil on the TV and we'd all like try and help him with the puzzles, or we'd have like the game facts printed out like
Yeah.
in the typewriter font, and me, mum, my sister would be like trying to help him solve these like puzzles on Tomb Raider or Resident Evil or something as he like goes through. And those games aren't scary for kids. I don't know why they were ever 18 or rated. They're ridiculous in my opinion. Um, and then also just like playing games on PC. Like in my parents' old house, not before, like the one I grew up in up until I was about 12. There was like the living room and then a room in between the living room and the kitchen. And it was like the old kitchen, but we called it the computer room because all that was in it was two computers, my parents' computer, and then we had my parents' old computer, which was next to it, which was the one that we were allowed to play on as kids. And we just had so much stuff on there, like old Sierra Online games that we would play. We had like Age of Empires, Diablo, and I just remember just like fucking around in that with my brother and my sister, and we would just like put all the cheats into like Age of Empires and like have
Yeah.
a million cars, and we would just like drive all the cars around and like completely destroy the place, and like finding all of these cheat codes and feeling like we were like hacking the thing and like, oh my god, look how good we are because we were able to like get all these cars out, or we managed to find out how to get a load of money into The Sims, and now look at my amazing house. It's like massive and awesome. Like doing stuff like that, I feel like was a really fun experience. Just like figuring stuff out yourself when you're a kid, you kind of feel like a bit of a hero, especially when it's stuff like your parents don't know about.
Totally. I think a good example of that kind of thing for me is definitely like Grand Theft Auto. Like that's the first thing I think of is like playing
Yeah.
with like my best friend Jimmy or like my buddy Joey, and like it would be like a Friday night and we're eating pizza or whatever and like fucking passing the controller back and like play until you die, see how many stars you can rack up, see like who can do the craziest shit, and like just putting in like a bunch of cheat codes and driving the car, like putting the anti-gravity and then the water and like driving around the map and
Hmm.
flying, and or like popping in the tank and just like driving until it explodes and then trying to run and get another one before they take you out and all that kind of stuff. That was definitely like a really like a good one for that. And like I think about being like in my early 20s and when I was living in my dad's house and like playing Mario Party 2 on my Wii, with like the GameCube controllers plugged in, and like that was like a regular rotation thing for me and my friends back then. And like, there's a lot of things like that where it's like about like the time and place, and I think that's like
Yeah, it's
this.
100% about the time and place. The only real friend's house I ever slept over, I've spoken about it like a million times, was my friend Jack's. Like we were really close, and he had like every console, and like we would just stay up all night just play. Like, oh, what should we play now? Let's plug the Sega Saturn in. Like he's the only person I've ever met in my life that owned a Sega Saturn, and we would just play whatever on it. And
Yeah.
like that, in the living room there was like the main TV, and then there was like a little one in the corner, and we would just sit in this chair, like us two little kids. It was like one armchair, and like when we were kids, it felt like the biggest fucking chair in the world. I imagine it's just like a normal size armchair, but we were like sat in this armchair, just like playing GoldenEye for
Sure.
hours. It was so good.
Oh
But I
man.
like talking about cheat codes. We had a whole episode on cheat codes where we spoke about our favorite cheat codes. Episode 38 was all about cheat codes and cheat code central.
Yeah. Oh my god, what a good one. Yeah, go check that episode out. Um yeah, and another one, you said the thing about playing with like your dad and everything, like that reminded me of me and my dad played a lot of games together on the PlayStation back in the day, but like the one that we played the most was definitely like Crash Team Racing. We were always playing that together, and I
I
remember
wish we had that. I really do.
so
That's just
fun.
reminded me. I managed to get. I always wanted to play games with other people, and like I managed to get my mum to play a game once, and like she's not great with a controller. Like she's good with a mouse and keyboard. She loves Diablo, for example. She's played all of those games, and she plays mainly on her iPad now. But the controller, she wasn't so hot. We were playing Colin McRae Rally. I don't know why I selected Colin McRae Rally, which is like a precursor to the Dirt games. And she was like trying to like tilt this PlayStation controller.
Yup.
It's
That's
like
so funny.
it was like an old PlayStation controller with no joysticks on, so she was meant to be like using the buttons. She's there like trying to tilt the controller. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that, mum. And obviously, it would work like that if she wanted to play Mario Kart now.
Sure. It was so funny because like I remember when we first got like when video games first entered my lexicon, I was so little, right? And like I remember playing like Gex 2 Enter the Gecko with my dad a lot, and he got super obsessed with it. I think I've told this story before. And like he had the PlayStation in his room for a while, and like I would get to play until I went to bed, and then he'd like stay up playing it and shit. But like with Crash Team Racing, I remember he would like he'll still joke about it to this day, where it would be like he was like, I remember there being a point where it was like, you clearly eclipsed me, and we're like, you just understand this in a fundamental way that I don't, right? And like, you could sit down with any new game and like figure, oh, this is how games work generally. So like trial the buttons and figure something out. And he was like, we got to a point where it would be like, it used to be, I would always beat you, and then we were neck and neck. And then it got to a point where it would be like, every time we played, you're kicking my ass, you're half paying attention, you're talking to me while we're playing, and I'm sitting there focusing so hard trying to beat you, and I just, you're kicking my ass. And just like that is such a, I think of that a lot, of like me and him sitting on my old bedroom floor in front of my tiny little fucking like 10-inch Sony TV, just like, oh yeah, like play PlayStation. That was like, yeah, that's definitely another one that's, I think that game was just good on its face. It's a great game. I played it a lot by myself, but I definitely have a lot of nostalgia for playing it with my dad. Especially because all my friends like Mario Kart, right? And I was like, fuck that shit. Like,
Yeah.
This is way better.
Crash is the one, yeah.
Yeah, and I couldn't get anyone to play it with me,
That's because you were a PlayStation kid.
It was. Well, but also not, because like I had a Game Boy, right? Like, and that was I played my Game Boy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was the same, but I feel like at home it was always PlayStation, and then handhelds were Game Boys until Sony came out, and I was like, 100% PlayStation Portable. Are you kidding? Yeah,
I mean,
definitely want one of those.
I love the PSP. Yeah, but anyway, we could be rattling this off for the rest of the episode. So we'll move on there. But great questions, Ed. I really like that one. Thanks for writing in. All right, so let's jump into our first story here. In video games, we've heard of price cuts, but how about a price hike?
Mental, isn't it?
So, MetaQuest on their Twitter account made the announcement this week. In order to continue investing in moving the VR industry forward for the long term, we are adjusting the price of MetaQuest 2 headsets to $399, 128 gigabytes, and $499.99, 256 gigabytes, starting on August 1st, 2022.
What's so funny is they don't say what the previous price was. So someone who doesn't have a Quest or isn't tuned in might look at that and think that's a price cut, because that's usually what happens, right? And the wording is like, we're going to continue investing, we're moving the industry forward.
Steve, I'd love to cut you off right there just for a second, because the top reply that I'm seeing right now is to this, because they also say, hey, you can also download Beat Saber for free as like a way to try to soften the blow. Okay, whatever.
Or for a limited time, only until the end of this year.
Right, until December 31st. But one of the top replies here is from someone saying, are they raising the price or lowering the price? I forgot the original price. The reply from the official MetaQuest Twitter is, starting in August, we are adjusting the price of MetaQuest 2 headsets to $399.99 and $499.99. No answer to the question. Unbelievable.
Of course, this comes in the week where Meta's posted its first sales fall ever, with lower revenue, lower advertising, and the FTC is trying to block them from buying the VR fitness app within the game studio within. So it's like, it's not really a good time for them this week.
No. I mean, as evidenced by this, right? Like,
yeah,
it's just wild.
I think it's. I get that they're trying to. They went into more detail on their blog. They said it's down to the cost of the parts and things that they need. That they are struggling to manufacture these things, right? But I don't know. I feel like if their big bet is the metaverse and making that work, and like this is the future of their company, and they like rebranded from Facebook to Meta to like demonstrate that, and they were all in on this thing, just suck it up, like suck up the difference in like the cost, and get more people in on it, because the price point that they hit, $299, was so good. Like it was such a compelling product for that. They just didn't have, and they still don't have, those like must-have experiences on there that we've spoken about, right? Like it's always been, it's good for a VR game. And I think aside from Beat Saber and a couple of other games, like there's not really anything that you necessarily need VR for. Like VR chat, for example, I think is a really great experience. I think Beat Saber is a really great experience. I had a great time with I Expect You to Die, and those are things I don't think you can do in a traditional game. But my God, like $3.99 as a starting point. I know it doesn't come close to other competitors' headsets. Like the index is for a decent Valve index setup is $1,000, but it's a lot of money, a lot of money.
Well, and I think it's just a bad look, right? Like
A really
it's
bad look. Like this is a 2-year-old product at this point, and the product that you're buying now isn't any different to the product you bought 2 years ago.
right.
I can understand it if they introduced a new model, and they're like with that it went up by $100 because he's got a new chip that costs a little bit more, but
Yeah,
to have the
frankly,
exact same parts.
that's what they should have done, right? Is I think release a new version and then cut off this version so that they don't have to sell the cheaper model if they can't afford to sell it at that price. Fine, but like it's nuts because it's like, can you imagine any other tech right, like no one does this. It's always supposed to go the opposite way, right? 2 years in, you expect a decrease, not an increase. That's silly. And I think it does look bad for them. They're already a company that people don't like and don't want to get behind. And you also have, I think like from my perspective, I feel like the marketing around the Meta Quest since they changed it from Oculus has been really, really messy, right? Like if you see any of the like the ads that they're pushing towards the mainstream consumer, they're very like, oh, like you think this is just for video games? Nah, that's nerd shit. You could do other not nerd shit on it, like workout or something. And they don't actually have. There's not a good value prop for people that aren't gamers, really. There's not a lot.
I agree, and like
there's
the
not much you can do
alone,
in VR that isn't gaming.
Well, the VR chat I don't think is gaming. It's a social experience. I think social VR is something that is actually quite compelling, especially during the lockdown period. I can imagine having that space to go to.
You're right,
It's like an outlet.
But they weren't marketing it around that,
No, they're not. They're not going to market it because their thing, Meta Horizon or Meta Spaces or whatever
Right.
the fuck they call it, is shit, and no one's come on board to it because VR chat was there first, and that's where everyone is, and it's not restricted just to the Quest. It's on every platform, so it's open, and everyone's going to go and use that. Like,
And
why would you restrict it? Why would you restrict yourself and who you can hang out with?
And I think
just for one device.
Part of the problem with that too, though, right, is that because VR chat, like you said, it's not necessarily like a gaming experience, but like we did a whole episode about VR. Maybe you can find the episode number for me while I'm making this point, where we had one of our Patreon producers on, that Doc guy, to talk about like VR as a consumer product. And in VR chat, like because VR is inherently a video game centric product for the most part, like VR chat is inundated with gamers and nerd shit, and like that doesn't necessarily appeal to the average person who uses like Facebook or like Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, right? Like any other like social media that isn't steeped in video game nerd pop culture shit, right? And like there's a lot of people who are not engaged with that shit that might be interested in the concept of like a VR chat, but like the versions of it that exist are certainly not going to appeal to them. Because if they try to go into that environment and then all of a sudden all they see is like a bunch of anime characters and people running around as Master Chief and all this shit that like we know is very prevalent, that's going to turn them off.
I dress as a banana.
Right, like
myself.
I think that, I don't know. I think that there's still a real barrier between that kind of tech and normal, quote unquote normal people. No disrespect intended, right? But I'm one of you.
It's a niche product, and they've bet big on VR. Zuckerberg's put the company on it basically. It is he put everything into this, and it's not paid off, and it's not going to pay off for 10 years for them. And that's a big bet to ask investors to back, especially when your advertising dollar is going down. People aren't advertising on your platform anymore because everyone's exiting your platform for TikTok. So much so that you're making all of your apps look like TikTok. Instagram is just a facsimile of TikTok, and so is Facebook now. They all look the same. And it's it's a shame because I feel like Oculus was such a strong brand and like the branding has become so lost. Like the Twitter account still has the Oculus logo, but it's not anywhere else to be seen. It's not on the device anymore other than the like menu button. The front of the device says Meta now, and it's the Meta Quest. Oculus is gone, and it was such a strong game focused
It was the
brand, and I feel
original
like they could have
headset,
gone with
right?
it.
Like that
Yeah.
was the original VR headset, and it was like the Kickstarter campaign and all that stuff. Like it was definitely felt like a grassroots video game thing. And yeah, it certainly doesn't feel that way anymore. The only positive I can say here is like, well, hopefully he really did bet the farm on this and it doesn't pay off because I would love to see Facebook go away. So
Yeah, I mean, I really like the Quest as a device. I still use mine multiple times a week to play Beat Saber or a couple of other games that I hop into every now and again. But I don't know that I would have bid for £400 or $400. I don't think I would. Like it's too much for me to bet on it and give it a try. And I think it will be for a lot of consumers now.
I agree. So let's jump into our talking point for the week. Grand Theft Auto 6 is apparently imminent. And according to a big report that came from, Mr. Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg, Rockstar has been really undergoing a pretty major shift the last couple years. The way that Jason characterizes it in the headline is that it's cleaned up its frat boy culture and Grand Theft Auto 2, which I thought was an interesting way to put it. Obviously, we've known largely due to reporting from Jason Schreier over the last couple of years that Rockstar reportedly had a pretty rough culture issue where some of that stuff was concerned, not only just I guess from like from a work standpoint purely, right, as well as maybe culturally, right? It's kind of both.
Yeah, even Crunch, right?
Right.
Like, there was that
That's
big
what I was trying to
report
say.
that he
Right.
wrote about. Yeah, it came out when he was over at Kotaku about the massive crunch that they had undergoing to get Red Dead Redemption 2 out of the door, and it feels like that's gone away a little bit. In his report, he's spoken about some improved conditions over there. There's a new flexi time policy, which you immediately gain back any extra time you spend working. So it's like time off in lieu. If you do need to crunch, you'll get some additional time off elsewhere. It's not just like unpaid extra work anymore. They've tried to narrow the gender pay gap, and they've hired some additional producers to lighten the workload and make sure that projects are better managed than they have been before.
Yeah, and that last one in particular is something that I know that they had been pretty resistant to in the past, I believe, if memory serves. So yeah, it seems like some pretty major cultural changes at the studio, which is great to hear, right? I mean, obviously, Rockstar is a studio that has a legacy of making some of the most celebrated and most financially successful games of all time. And you hate
Just the most successful video game of all time. Like GTA 5
financially,
alone
yeah.
would be like a dream for any company to achieve that in their lifetime. Like, imagine an indie developer making like that much over the course of their entire life. You'd be like very, very happy.
And not for nothing, right? We were just talking about this on Nintendo Noise this week. Red Dead Redemption 2, I think, is also on that list, is in the top 10. So they have multiple games that have crossed.
Where does table tennis come? Because that's one of my favorite Rockstar games.
Great question. I'm not sure. But it's definitely something that you don't want to see the studios that lead the industry have that have those problems, right? Because I think that makes it really easy for other studios to, follow that example, right? Of like, oh, the most successful studio in the world, Crunches, the most successful studio in the world, has this frat boy culture, right? Like, that kind of becomes the example that, that sets the rule, right? So,
Yeah. Well, Crunch in particular it's always been multiple times we've heard from studio heads just saying, this is just what's necessary to get the game across the line. And I think it was last week's episode that we spoke about where Insomniac were talking about like, multiple devs there came out and said we didn't crunch at all to get Ratchet and Clank finished. And you can make these games without having to crunch. It's just about managing properly. And hopefully, with those additional producers on board, that will mean that things are managed a lot better. And Jason's a fantastic journalist, and he's done his legwork and spoken to multiple people there. The story wouldn't have been posted if that wasn't the case. So I definitely believe everything that's written in the story.
So yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. So let's talk about the game itself a little bit because we did get some details. At present, the game is at least 2 years away, which is kind of insane when you think about how long ago Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. Just how long they have had between releases, especially when you think about the fact that Grand Theft Auto, the trilogy, right, that everyone thinks of, all came out on
they were a lot shorter.
But they all came out on one console. It's crazy,
yeah.
right? And we didn't have a new Grand Theft Auto at all on the last generation.
No, we didn't. No, yeah, you're right. But we had two. We had two on the prior generation. But
did?
five's now been on 3 generations of console.
Isn't that crazy to think about though? That the cadence has gotten less. It went from 3 in one generation to 2 in one generation to 0 to now 1. Oh Jesus. Okay. Granted, we got Red Dead Redemption 2 from them on last gen, but wild.
And I feel like that was the right move because that franchise was ready for a sequel a lot more than GTA because everyone is still playing GTA Online. So there's still fun to be had in the GTA world.
But
I'm just ready for a new setting.
I don't play online games like that though. And
no, me neither.
I want to just play a game, right? I just want a new Grand Theft Auto. But also I'm interested because the whole this cultural shift is something I think is important because I really don't know that a modern Grand Theft Auto, a Grand Theft Auto made in the style of the first 5 Grand Theft Autos now, I don't know if it works. I really don't.
Well, I don't either because even the latest version of the game released on Series X and PS5, they've removed some jokes. There was a bunch of transphobic jokes in there that they're no longer in that version of the game. I don't know if they've patched them out of the PS4 version. I would hope they had, but I think they are trying, and they've spoken about not wanting to punch down and not wanting to make jokes about marginalized people, and it seems like they're making strides in that regard. I think it's okay to be skeptical.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is we don't know. We it's easy to say that shit. It's another thing to do it in a way that lands. Right. And I don't know. Are we going to feel that way when we're actually playing the game that oh, yeah, they're not doing those things. They're not punching down. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. And then it's also how much of their core audience is mad about the fact that they're not doing those things. Or, I've seen a lot of people being oh, they're going woke or whatever. And it's just okay.
I don't, I just don't get that. I really don't understand why you think you have to be just a horrible person or have the characters be just horrible people to have an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
You can make those games without having to make homophobic, transphobic, or racist jokes. You just don't have to do any of those things. I can watch a comedy show, and guess what? None of those fucking things happen from the people I watch, and I still enjoy the thing. And what?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough, because that's the thing is I don't know, right? And it's interesting because GTA is the most mass market thing in the world almost, right? It's such a mainstream thing, and it's how who is that audience, and how have tastes evolved, and and it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see.
I want to know how much of their audience is kids, because I
A
know
lot.
it's not just over 18s
No,
playing this game,
no.
and to be honest, I think this is a franchise now where they could put GTA 6 out, and it could make all of these changes, and people will still buy the thing. Because it's going to have a GTA Online mode anyway, and how many people are actually buying these games to play the single player at this point? Like, there must be tons of people just downloading the GTA Online
Definitely.
section
Yeah.
of the game, because they split them out now on the next gen versions. You can just play GTA Online if you want to.
Yeah, and I think there's a large group of people that are going to operate that way, and it won't matter. I think a lot of kids probably jump in and start playing GTA 5 when they turn 18 or whatever, and never touch the single player campaign. And just play GTA Online with their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Buy all those shark coins.
yeah,
Whatever
right,
they're
and
called, I can't remember.
and I'm sure that'll be the case with GTA 6 as well. But we do know a few more details. The game reportedly is going to have the first playable female protagonist as one of the two lead characters. And apparently it's going to be like a Bonnie and Clyde-style duo who are, like lovers who are crooks. And reportedly the female protagonist is Latina. And the original plan is to have large swaths of both like North and South America, but then they've now kind of scaled it back to just have the initial map be focused on a modern day Miami. So Vice City coming back. We love to see that. And then the plan is to kind of like expand surrounding areas over time, and reportedly like they will add new cities and new like campaigns and like content as they go.
Yeah, that's gonna be so good for GTA Online, because they've had that same map since like 2013 at this point, and it's
Right.
never changed.
And I think that's probably what they'll end up doing, right? Is like we'll have Vice City, and then eventually they'll be like like they did that with GTA 4, right? Where there was the story DLC. I remember there was like the original story, and then there was like the Ballad of Gay Tony, and then like another one, and whatever. And like you do it like that, and you can eventually have multiple maps that have their own thriving like set of stuff for you to go and do, right? So that when you run out of stuff to do in one city, you can go check out another one. And I mean, like, if they do that and they do it right, they might never need to release another GTA ever again. And just like keep building on it.
GTA Online should just become its thing. Like, it should be, you buy GTA 6 and that's the story mode, but GTA Online should be like Elder Scrolls Online, where
I think
it's a separate thing, and they just keep adding cities to it. And I like load into New York, or I load into Miami, and I play what the campaign that's going on there that week.
Yeah, I imagine it'll be something like that, honestly. But yeah, I think by and large, right? Like I'm interested in this. I'm excited by the idea of and the potential of a new GTA 6, even though I am skeptical about what that looks like in 2023, 2024, right? Like, do people still respond to GTA the same way they used to? I don't know. I think there's a lot of things about it that, like, I think going back and looking at it with modern eyes are probably don't hold up to scrutiny. And it's going to be interesting to see, like, how do you capture the essence and spirit of what is cool and fun and was edgy and innovative about Grand Theft Auto, and present it in a new, fresh way for a new audience. And I don't know. I think it's an uphill battle. I really do. You're following up the most successful game of all time. That's already tough.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, but I think they can do it. Like, I look at, I would want them to look at shows like The Wire and other stuff from like Netflix and HBO that can do edgy and modern without being homophobic, transphobic, racist, whatever.
I don't necessarily think that's the right tone for Grand Theft Auto, though, because it's supposed to be satire, right? And like, obviously, I'm agreeing with you that it shouldn't be, bigoted. But it's kind of like the whole point of it is supposed to be this like crass,
It's
loud,
larger than life.
you
Yeah.
know, yeah. But like it also used to have this kind of like young upstart energy that it doesn't have anymore. Like it's a big dog now, and like I think being the big multi-million, it's like I feel like it's almost like the South Park problem, right? Where it's like you're not counterculture anymore, you're culture now. So how do you like, you know what I mean? Like, you're talking about multi-million dollar companies, but you're a multi-million dollar company, right? Like, so like I think that takes some of the teeth out of that shit. That's not me saying that I don't believe that they can pull it off. I really liked Red Dead Redemption 2, and for all it has its problems, but I think Rockstar is generally a really accomplished developer, and I think there's a lot of really good talent there that can certainly deliver and find a way to do this. But it's going to be interesting because I wonder what the execution is going to look like and how the audience is going to react. Because like I've seen, there's the whole, that obviously this is going to come up, right? Because it's 2022 and it's somehow still controversial to have a woman lead a video game. But I've already seen two distinctly different camps reacting to this news in a negative way, right? Where there are the people that you'd expect who are like, oh, Rockstar's, going woke and they don't want to, they're not going to they're not going to punch down anymore. And they interpret that as meaning like, oh, they're being censored, right? And it's going to be PC. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. Same thing to, lob at, oh, it's of course, right? Now they're going to have a woman be one of the lead characters. And
I genuinely don't understand how it's taken this long, because in those games you play multiple characters. It's not like you're just playing one.
Well,
throughout the entire game.
Only in 5.
Like
5 was
5, yeah. 5 you had like 4 playable characters, right?
3.
So, well, why wasn't one of them a woman?
I don't know, but point being, right? Like it's not a controversial thing at all to have one of the playable characters not be a man, right? Like, okay, great. But you also know that like there are people who are going to feel some kind of way about that, and does that impact their decision to buy the game? Probably not, but it courts controversy, right? From a segment of the audience of one of the most, popular and mass market media franchises that exists. And then I saw the other side of that fence, people being like, okay, great. So, we're going to have one of the lead characters be a Latino woman who's a criminal, right? And like, that's a stereotype, and like, that's how, that's like a unfortunately common representation, right, of Latino people in Western media, right? And it's like you can already see where like because Grand Theft Auto is just like this, it's a monolith, right? Like people are going to scrutinize it from a million different angles, no matter what it is, right? Whether its politics are just as bad as they always were, if they're improved, if they're not, if you think they never were bad, like whatever, wherever you come down on it, there's going to be an angle where a large section of people can be like, I don't like this, it's different now. And
even though that is the case, it's still going to sell just as well, if not better, than the last game.
Maybe. I guess that's the question, because like,
if all of this stuff goes into the online mode with the map that changes, that scales up, that expands, hell yeah, people are gonna hop onto it.
And I think you're probably right. And I think a great way to think about that, right, is I think I mentioned earlier, right, that the top 10, right, best-selling video games of all time, number 10, and this is a list from Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt. But number 2, in terms of number of units sold, is Grand Theft Auto 5, and number 10 is Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 2 did not review as well as Red Dead Redemption 1, right? But it sold a lot better. So it's also like, maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe you're right? That it's like maybe Grand Theft Auto is just too big to fail, and the name Grand Theft Auto carries so much weight, and what GTA Online means is like there'll be large swaths of people that play the game and never even play the story and never even meet these main characters because they don't matter to the thing that they showed up to do, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think it's interesting to think that because it's so popular that now it might run into an issue. But I don't know.
But it's been mired in controversy throughout.
Forever,
right? It's
right?
not. This isn't the first time. Remember hot coffee? Like there's.
But those are
always
different
been
kinds
stuff.
of controversy, right? Like, because like the idea that like mainstream media and like conservative parents and stuff were like, oh, Grand Theft Auto's bad. Like, doesn't matter. That made it cool to the people that were its target audience. But if that target audience is like shitty and is like, I don't want to play as a woman, or I miss the racist jokes or whatever, right? Does that impact the success of Grand Theft Auto? I don't know. I really don't know.
I wonder if it's just a vocal minority.
It might
in the
be.
same way that we had the same shit prior to like Cyberpunk being released, right? And you had all of these people targeting the reviewers, saying that they were wrong, even though they'd never even played the game. So I really think it's got to be the vocal minority. It's like it's the second best selling game of all time.
I'm still here. My camera turned off for some reason, but I'm still with you. Hello. Oh, I'm back. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. It really is, because it's one of those situations where is it a vocal minority, or are there more assholes than you think? And
probably it's more assholes than I think.
Well, I'll tell you what, right? Like,
you don't sell billions of copies or whatever, millions of copies and billions of dollars worth without picking up some assholes along the way.
Right. And I'll tell you what, I've always been wrong in that equation. Whenever I've been like, people are not that bad. They surprise me. So I really don't know. And I think it's an interesting question. Like, I think that there will probably be a vocal segment of the audience that feels that way. Whether that's a minority or a majority, I guess, remains to be seen.
I mean, maybe. Just don't buy the fucking game then if you're not happy about it, because this is the game that's being made and you can't change that. So it's like either get on the train or fuck off.
Or get out of the way, right? Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'm interested in it. I'm excited about it. I like the idea of a Bonnie and Clyde kind of story. I like the idea of...
I want it to be based on the duo from Pulp Fiction. When they're in the cafe and they're like steal everyone's wallet.
Bunny and what's his name? Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I mean that's the vibe, right? Like that. I like that idea in principle. I like the idea of it being like about like a group of lovers or whatever. But we'll see. I think it's got a lot of potential. So we'll see. I like the idea. So let's close this out with a question from. It's actually the patented 3-question formula from one Asobi, who wrote in. First one's about GTA, and then we got 2 that are just we're just gonna close off with them. They'll be nice little, cool down.
Someone
questions.
needs to Photoshop like the patented 3-question formula onto like a bottle or something. I want a little bottle over here, like
it's
the
like a
3-question formula.
Asobi's 3-question formula.
I can take a little sip from whenever Asobi writes in, have a little 3-question formula.
Asobi's like a snake oil salesman, like rolls into town in like a wagon, like, yes, my patented 3-question formula. It'll fix baldness and postpartum depression and whatever ails you. Anyway, let's jump into them. The first one is, with Rockstar focusing on GTA 6 now mainly, what is your biggest wish for Grand Theft Auto 6 to have / improve on in comparison to GTA 5?
See, I've not played the story mode of GTA 5, so I can't really talk to that, but the online mode, I think it would, at this point, like I said, I think it's just stale. It needs a bigger map. And if it can be an ever-expanding map, or even if those are like paid DLCs that you buy to tack on to GTA Online, I think people will absolutely hop onto that. But I'm really glad they're getting back to Vice City, because I loved GTA Vice City.
That's my favorite one.
It was my favorite one. But that's partially because of the 80s setting, and I wonder how it feels like in modern day.
I'm not as excited about it being modern day, but I do like Vice City, so I'm excited for that in principle.
The only other thing I would want is for this to launch on PC at launch, but I don't think it will because Rockstar's games traditionally come to PC 6 to 12 months down the line. We
Or
saw that
never.
most or never. But Red Dead 2 did pretty well on PC. I think they're going to want to port GTA 6 over. GTA 5 it has a phenomenal following on PC.
I want Red
Not
Dead 1.
not
Red Dead 1.
not least because there's like a ton of mods for GTA 5, and I think the modding community will jump onto GTA 6 immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've got some wacky shit too.
Oh yeah, Macaulay plays a mod called 5M, which is an alternative to like the official GTA Online, and there's like role play servers, there's all sorts of different things. Like it's insane what modders have been able to achieve.
Yeah, I love watching the stuff where people are like, oh, like they dropped in, Iron Man or the Hulk or whatever, and like, some shit like that. And it's always like fun. So I think for me, so it sounds like for you, it's just more content. It's like not being a game that's from 2013.
Yeah, like I don't want to play it like now
Yeah,
in 20
like the
in
menus are
2022.
garbage and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's not an optimal experience. I think for me, it's definitely story stuff. I'm with this new direction, right? Like I want it to be a thing I don't cringe at. I want it to be something that I enjoy on
I
that
don't
level.
think I could play it if I cringed. Like I fell off of Cyberpunk in some part because I felt it was childish and like I didn't realize there were still transphobic jokes in GTA 5. I definitely would have been put off by it if I'd
Yeah,
have known that.
I mean, it came out in 2013, right? Like it's almost 10 years ago. Certainly a much different time. Not to say that it was right then, but I just mean like people's tolerance for it was different than it is now.
Yeah.
Um, so that stuff I think notwithstanding, right? Like that's obvious to me that those things need to change. But I think like I would like to see them rein things in a little bit. I think my recollection of my experience with GTA 5, which again is a game I played like 9 years ago, 10 years ago almost, is that I liked the story and like the parts of the game that were focused on like doing things, but there's so much content in that game that is stuff that I don't know why anyone would ever want to do. Like a tennis mini game or like a yoga mini game or like just like bullshit. Just bullshit that is tacked on to make the world feel like look how full this
Still
is.
real.
Look how
Yeah.
real this is. Yeah, but it's like nobody but like don't waste time filling the world with shit I don't want to do. Make it more narrow and deeper, right? Like I don't need the world to feel like exactly real. I want it to feel
I mean, it never felt real anyway. I got
right.
like like jolted out of the disbelief when you can only go in doors with gold handles, and it's just like, okay, so I know I'm looking for doors with gold handles, so it's like it's not real. I can't go in any building. There are set places I can go and do, and like of course, but then they go and put stuff in like yoga, which I had no idea was in there.
And that's the thing,
Why
right? Is
would
like
people play that?
I'd much rather spend time like I'd rather you have a smaller city where I can go in every building than
And it
a
sounds like
huge one.
that they've scaled it back from what they
Yeah,
had,
it
right?
does. It does. And that to
But
me is promising. The idea that they were like, oh, it's going to be huge. And they're like, it's going to be one city and let's focus and make it deep. That sounds
yeah,
good.
I like the sound of that. I mean, that was the goal of Shenmue and Shenmue 2. And I remember watching their dev diaries, and they specifically built a system so that there's like this part in Shenmue 2 where you go into this big building. There's like an apartment building, and they built a system so that it would, whenever you went into a room, the first time you went in, it would randomize where it put the furniture. So they didn't have to build out all of the rooms, but you could go into every room and there would be something to find and explore in every single room, and it made it feel a little bit more real, which I thought was really cool. And that was like back in like late 90s, early 2000s. I feel like now they could probably achieve a much more in-depth world.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, right? Is like I think a game that is smaller but like teases that it's bigger, like it feels bigger as a result, is way more valuable. Or like we talked about this with like Final Fantasy, right? Like they've said how Final Fantasy 16 is not going to be an open world. It's going to be like it's going to have open areas. I think that's a much better strategy for a lot of kinds of games, right? And not necessarily like to say that GTA shouldn't be an open world. It should be. It's like the definitive sandbox game, right? But like,
But to like some extent, it should be open areas. Like I want to be able to go back to the GTA 5 map, and I don't want to have them like next to each other or just have swaths of nothingness that I've got to drive from one area to the next. Like those cities should be like I either load into this area or I load into this area if they're going to go
sure,
down that route.
sure, yeah, that's what I mean. But like, I think of that as like those are two separate open worlds rather than like open areas, which is like I think of as being like narrower, right? Like where it's something like I'm playing Dragon Age. I was just playing Dragon Age again. I just beat it. But like in Origins and 2, it's very like this is like you're in an area and there's X number of places you can go on this part of the map and whatever, right? But like it's a
I just
finite.
think some of the best areas have been in Uncharted 4, where you're in that Jeep and you like drive down into that open area and you've got to go
Yeah.
to like all the different towers.
And that's the thing
And
is,
then
GTA shouldn't be
Last of
like
Us
that.
Part 2.
Like that is more like area, and I think that makes sense in like a linear game like that. And GTA should be like a living, breathing city, but I don't want it to be, a mile wide and an inch deep, right? Like that to me is not appealing. I would much rather have the city feel like it's teeming with life and that around every corner there's something for me to discover and explore rather
And I
than
felt that in those older games, and they were smaller maps, and it was fine. I'd be much happier with a smaller map with more stuff in, where
yeah,
you can hop into like go into like 10 different bars and every single one's different and there's something new to find and different to explore.
definitely agreed.
Plus, the other thing I want just before we round out this question, it's like I don't know, different crimes that they're involved in and like different businesses they're involved with. It always seems to be like strip clubs or like casinos and stuff like that. I want them to like do something different. Launder their money through a laundromat or something instead. Open a car wash like Walt. Do something fresh and new that's not just like, oh, here's another nightclub with like some strippers at the front because that is what GTA is.
Sure. All right. So number 2, just as a regular checkup, what is your most played console currently, and why are you using it the most? I like this question. This is like you can ask this at any time and it's a different answer. I
Yeah.
like that. Right now, my most played console has been my Xbox. I booted up my PlayStation again to play Stray, but before that, I played Dragon Age Origins all the way through, and then I played Dragon Age 2 all the way through, and I literally just finished Dragon Age 2 last night. So the vast majority of my gaming time has been on my Xbox lately. Yeah.
But why? Why are you using it the most?
Because I've been playing those games, and they're on Game Pass, and with FPS boost and smart delivery and all that stuff, like they look and run better than they would if I was trying to play them on Steam Deck or wherever else. So I opted for that to be the way I wanted to experience them again.
For me, if you can consider a console, it's the Steam Deck.
Yeah, it's a console.
If not, then it's been the Xbox. But the Steam Deck, that's where I've been playing Stray, and before that I was playing Days Gone. I actually have a real problem with my wrist at the moment, so I can't play games all that much. But when I do, it's mainly on the Steam Deck. I can connect Joy-Cons to that as well, which has really been helping. But that should be fixed soon, so then I'll be back to playing games. The only other game I've really been playing on console is Power Wash Simulator on Xbox because it's really easy. It's relaxing. I can just like wash some parks or houses or whatever, and I have a nice time with it. I put a podcast on. I listen to a podcast while I'm just something to do while I'm consuming content.
All right. And then number 3, I guess kind of related to number 2. What do you think of this generation so far? We're closing in on the consoles being out for about 2 years now. What are the goods, the bads, and the uglies so far?
Mm.
I'm gonna tell you what, I feel like I'm in a minority in terms of uh our level, people on the internet, but it's like I think they're both great. I think there obviously have been a lot of delays. There have been a lot of games that have not come out on time, and I think Xbox especially has not had a lot of exclusives to hang their hat on, and PlayStation has had them few and far between, right? But we did a whole episode where we were talking about how at the same point in the PS4's life cycle, it was about the same amount of stuff. There's not, it's not as much of a dearth as I think it feels like it is.
There was just more of a cutoff right at the beginning, and because they're both on the same architecture, and there was the inability to sell the numbers I think they wanted to, I feel like Sony had forecasted that they were going to sell a lot more if they were unrestricted. Sure. And because of that, that's why they made that commitment to the generations and making sure that all of these games were going to be exclusive to PS5 moving forwards. I think if they were able to sell a shitload of PS5s more than they did, then I think Horizon Forbidden West would not have been on PS4.
Agreed.
It would have been an exclusive to the PS5 to try and get them to shift more consoles.
Same with God of War.
And the fact that it was able to be on PS4, I think is great. I think they should put games on PS4 to the point where it's not hindering development anymore. And if that is now, if God of War is the last game, then so be it. I'll be very happy to see them move on. Because I don't think any Unreal Engine 5 games will be coming out on last generation.
Definitely not.
I like this console generation. I think it's just been a great quality of life improvement. I've played them a lot more than I played the last generation because of it. Stuff like Quick Resume, the speed of the consoles. I had a great time with some of the PlayStation exclusives like Deathloop and Ratchet and Clank. But I do kind of feel like I don't feel like the generation has really began, because we haven't really had those wow, look at this. This is now the next generation's arrived. I feel like we got a taste of it with that Matrix demo, but we haven't had any video games yet of that caliber that have had that world feel as full, look as real, and feel as rich as that demo did. And I feel like we're going to get there at some point. I also feel like ray tracing was and will continue to be a promise that will never be fulfilled by these consoles. These consoles do not do ray tracing to any level of performance that I feel is acceptable for most people. I'm not going to play a game at 30 frames per second to have ray tracing that's worse than on a PC.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't care about that shit at all, if I'm honest. I think for me, you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the quality of life stuff. That to me is, if that was the only thing I had paid for so far, I would say it's worth every penny. Because
even if you just saw it as this is a pro console,
right.
This is it's the same as the last gen. I'm playing all the same games, but it does 4K 60 instead of 1080p 60, and it's a shitload faster. It's the speed for me is the big thing.
To me, that's the fact that if that isn't a game changer for you, then I don't know how it isn't, frankly. Because to me, it's I used to, I remember even just last generation how much time I was spending fucking sitting, scrolling through Twitter, answering text messages, whatever bullshit, because I'm waiting at a loading screen,
Oh my god! And the fans, they were so loud as well. It was all the time, as it was booting up a game.
Constantly being taken out of the experience, right? Where it's oh, I'm right in this moment, and then now I'm sitting here waiting, and I open my phone, or I take a break, or I whatever, and and then I'm distracted, and it's I feel so much more engaged with my games now, because it's especially fucking going back and playing old games on Xbox. It's insane. It's truly insane how quick it is and how snappy it is to just be literally right now, right? Or I guess not right now because I finished Dragon Age, but last night, right, when I sat down to play Dragon Age, the last bit of 2, I sat down, I pressed the fucking button on my Xbox. Within 5 seconds, I'm at the home screen. I press A and I'm right back where I was. And in under 30 seconds, I can sit down, turn on the console, and be back in my game, and not be sitting at a loading screen, not have to boot up the game for the first time, not be, immediately met with a loading screen as soon as I load in. It's like I'm right back in it. And like that is you can't take that away. You like that to me is such a game changer in terms of the way I interact with games, my willingness to go back and play old games because they run better, they look better, and I can easily jump in and jump out and juggle things so much better than you used to be able to. Like, all those things just encourage me to play more games and to play games the way I feel like playing them, right? Because I'm not constantly met with just like technological hurdles or bullshit that's standing in the way of the experience. And yeah, like, do I want more premium AAA next gen experiences or whatever? Like, yeah, for sure. But like, I know those are coming, and like, this is how console generations work. I invested in this console for the next 5, 7, 10 years of its life, not the first 2 years, right? Like that's not the definition of what this experience is going to be. We're getting to the point now where like we got Horizon Forbidden West this year. That to me felt like a real next gen game, right? We have God of War coming later this year. I think that's going to feel like a real next-gen game. And I think we have a lot on the horizon, no pun intended, that looks good and is I'm excited about, right? And I think is going to deliver on that promise, and that we're going to get to that point soon where we're going to see a game where we're like, yeah, like this could not have run on PlayStation 4, and like that's the moment.
I think we're seeing that already. Like like we know that Ratchet and Clank couldn't have
right.
run. Like I go back to some of those older games. Like when I first got the Xbox, I played through a lot of the Tomb Raider games, and it's crazy when you notice it, you won't unnotice it. The like corridors and gaps and crevices that you used to go through as it was like loading in assets and like outloading like the stuff that you'd just been before, so you're in this tiny little area, used to happen in games all the time. And I can't wait for developers to just be able to drop all of that stuff, all of those tricks that they used to pull.
I feel like it's already happening though,
assets.
right? Because it's like you look at like the way that like the loading screens in Final Fantasy VII were hidden, where you would have like the doors where Cloud would like really slowly lift them up and whatever, and he'd sit there and then go turn the knob and then walk through and like shit like that. And it's like you don't see it as much anymore. And it's like there's like the Spider-Man example we always go back to, where like you have to go in and toggle on the load screens to even see them, right? Like the SSD stuff is next level, and like that is going to make such a difference in the way that like we experience games and worlds, and like I'm so excited by that. But I think for me, like I have never ever once felt since these consoles came out that I wasted my money, or that it wasn't a good investment, because I am so enjoying my time with them. I think there have been multiple notable console exclusive games on the PlayStation 5 for me in the last 2 years, between Miles.
I think people
Horizon
don't consider them exclusives though, because they're on last gen. I've heard a lot of people say that about the Xbox side as well.
But like
Forza Horizon 5, it was on last gen too, but it played best
right,
on
and
this
like
generation.
Fair play. If that's how you feel, that's fine. But I can tell you that I beat the game probably 2-3 hours quicker than you did, because I wasn't sitting at loading screens. And like for someone who is busy and like time is a premium, that makes a big difference in my mind. And that might not be the same for everybody, right? Maybe that's a privileged position. But for me, like that's a night and day thing, and I'd pay for that alone. So to me, I'm like, I really love this generation so far. I love these consoles. I think the quality of life is next level. I really like the controllers. I think, both of the two new, boxes have a lot of good, unique things to offer that the other doesn't, which I like. And I think all of like between them and the Switch and the Steam Deck, like each one of them fills a different niche for me in a way that's meaningful. And I think I'm getting the best experience I could be getting on each box. And I really appreciate that. Like I am really happy with where the hardware is at right now. I was ready for an upgrade, and I feel like they delivered,
Yeah. Yeah. Now what we need is Nintendo to give us that because I feel like I'm ready for that upgrade on the
Uh-huh.
Switch.
I feel that way too.
Uh, and like once we get that, I feel like we're golden for a good few years. We can start worrying about when's the next console coming
Yeah.
out.
So to put a pin in this and like wrap this one up, the goods, the bads, and the uglies. I would say the goods are quality of life improvements through the roof. Some solid software offerings so far. Not a lot, not nothing but bangers, but lots of good games. The bad, I would say, has been delays mostly, right? Like, has been games that
Yeah.
we thought were going to come sooner getting pushed back, and
But
some
not even just that, like being able to get hold of a console in the
sure.
first place,
I'd say
like it's a
that's the
pain in the
ugly.
fucking
I'd
ass.
say that's the ugly is the total inability for you to get these fucking things without working for it. That's a huge problem, and I think
Like even today, Amazon in the UK was sending out invites to buy a PlayStation
right.
5, and it's just like, come on, we're almost 2 years into this. We should have more of these by now.
And I honestly think that fuels a lot of the negativity in the conversation. Is that people are like, I can't even get one. Nah, there's not even anything I want to play on it. Ah, bah, bah, bah. And like it becomes this dismissive, like they're not, it's not ready yet. I don't need one right now. And like you want the narrative to be like, oh, you could get one right now, and they fucking rule. Don't you want to go get one? Don't you want to pick one up right now? Like that's where you want to be, and they're nowhere near that. And I think that narrative is
Yeah.
earned because you can't get one, and there isn't a bunch of killer software that you can only play on these boxes. Sure, it's a way better experience, but like I think the experience that you get and the difference maker that we're talking about is seeing is one thing, experiencing it in your day-to-day life is the difference maker. And unless you own the box, you're not going to feel that. Even if you go to a friend's house, you go to a demo, whatever, and you're like, "Wow, this loads really fast." You don't think about how much of a difference that makes until you're sitting there playing a video game for 6 hours and you haven't looked at your phone once. Like that's when that makes a difference. And I think unless you own the box, it's really easy to be like, whatever, right? Like what I have is good enough. And it probably is good enough. But like if you want the optimal experience, right? Like if you want to talk about like what, is the best way to play a video game right now, I do think it's on the next gen consoles, Like even a PC can't do quick resume the way that the Xbox does.
Not yet. I think it will at some point though.
Maybe, but it can't right now. And I think for third party games, I think the Xbox is the best way to play any video game, third party. And I don't think anyone can argue with that. I don't think unless you're like a real PC like nut and like you really care about ray tracing and all that stuff. But it's like I don't think the average gamer cares about that much. And
I don't know, and I do think it's great. I mean, it's not perfect, there's still a ton of games that you can't play on there despite the amazing backwards compatibility program. Like I can't play Simpsons Hit and Run. I have the disc, I own it. I can't put it in and play that thing. But I can play it on PC. I can play it on my Steam Deck. I can do what I want with it. So there are some things I think a PC it's still better
oh
for.
yeah, that's not
But
me
for
talking
the
shit
most
about the
part,
the platform. It's just more like I think
I
in
think
terms
for
of
the average consumer, I would never recommend them getting a PC. It's
no,
just
it's
like go get yourself an
enthusiasts.
Xbox, get Game Pass. You can play all of the Xbox games on Game Pass day one. You don't have to worry about ever buying a game. You just pay this money and like you're done. You're golden. And then a lot of the third party games that come there anyway, and you've got EA Play included. So for me, it's a no brainer. I think these consoles are probably going to go down as one of the greatest generations. I think they are an iterative improvement, and I hope that we just continue to iterate moving forwards. I don't want to go to another architecture again where we have to deal with emulation layers and dealing with different compatibility layers and this, that, and the other. I don't.
I think
I
you're at a
think,
point where it's kind of like, why would you, right? Like,
well, there are reasons, like if ARM is offering a better performance, like obviously the Switch is a ARM-based system on a chip. I feel like maybe you would want to migrate over from x86, but I can't see it anytime soon. Not for a device that's plugged into a wall. If Xbox did a handheld, that's another question.
and that's a conversation for another episode. One I'd definitely be interested in having. But we'll wrap it up there for the day. Thank you to everybody who wrote in. Thank you, everybody who tuned in for this episode of FlipScreen Games Podcast. Remember, if you want to go above and beyond and show your support, head over to patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. If you don't have any money to toss our way, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to our Discord, our Twitch, our social media, our everywhere we are on the web. Anywhere that you want to get involved with the show, that's the place to go. Flipscreen.games. We hope that you enjoyed the episode. We hope that we'll see you next week for another episode of FlipScreen Games Podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week. Good stuff.
Like this, and then I'm going straight to bed.